Hello and welcome to this tactical analysis of the game between Tottenham Hotspur and Manchester United. If you're enjoying this series, please don't forget to smash the like button. It goes a really long way for a small channel like this. So I'm trying to keep these videos as short as possible, so I provide tactical summaries in the comments as well as also the description, so please have a look below. Of course, if you think I missed something or you think I should discuss something a little bit more, please don't forget to mention that in the comments down below. With that, let's get into the video. So starting with Tottenham, I'd say that they played in a 2-4-1-3 or a 2-3-5 shape. A lot of the momentum for Tottenham's attacks came from their fullbacks, who were typically positioned a little bit deeper than their wide midfielders, but would try and make direct runs into the spaces vacated by Manchester United's aggressive wing-backs. The idea being that with the high full-backs, you would force Manchester United's wing-backs to have to drop deep, and then you'd be able to kind of siege Manchester United's penalty box. Another means of Tottenham moving Manchester United's line a little bit deeper were runs by Son, who was constantly trying to find little runs in behind that would keep the Manchester United defenders honest. Conversely, Lucas Moura, who's stationed here wide this time, was constantly dropping deep to try and help Celso to progress the ball through the thirds. Typically, Harry Kane was positioning himself in the blind side of the far-sided wide centre-back for Manchester United, such that when the play developed, eventually they'll be able to cross it to him, and hopefully runs by Moura or Son will have dragged away the centre-backs such that he has space far side. Manchester United tried to defend in a 5-3-2 shape with the wing-back near side being relatively aggressive, so we see that here with Shaw, who's trying to push up towards the wide player for Tottenham Hotspur, so whether that was the full-back or the wide midfielder. But that requires the wide centre-back, in this case Harry Maguire, to also kind of support him, but that often put him in this really precarious position. And I want to ask you guys, do you think this was by design? Because this happens a lot during the game, where there were constantly spaces here between Varane and Maguire where you think a better team would have been able to exploit it. So the massive spaces between Varane aside, the wide centre midfielders for Manchester United were typically trying to shuttle across and just help out their wing back, so that when the wing back went to go and press the Tottenham Hotspur player, there wasn't the ability for them to be able to cut inside and then maybe run at the wide centre back of Manchester United. And Cavani was doing this throughout the game, dropping deep to just give the centre midfield a little bit more support. Okay, so here we have another example of Tottenham Hotspur's 2-4-1-3 shape, eventually moving to a little bit of a 2-3-5 if they can get their fullbacks really high up. In that centre midfield, we've got Lo Celso dropping to try and provide a means of linking the back and the front of the team, whilst Højbjerg and Skip provide a platform to be able to spread the play from right to left or left to right. And regards to Manchester United, we've got Luke Shaw ready to go and press Royal if the ball is passed out towards him again, whilst Fred was going to go and press Højbjerg, which was something that both him and Fernandes as the wide centre midfielders did up against either Skip or Højbjerg, was they just tried to reduce the amount of time that they had in those spaces and potentially try and force pass backs. Later on in the game, 2-0 down, Nuno Espirito Santo makes a couple of tweaks to his formation, and I say he moves to a 2-4-4 shape, or maybe you could say it's a 2-2-6. Anyway, the main idea is that you have Ndombele and Højbjerg as means of just helping to relieve the pressure of the Manchester United press. When I say press here, I mean that Manchester United are trying to harry and hound Tottenham mostly towards the touchline in those wide spaces. So having Dele Alli on instead of Lo Celso, there is no longer a player between the lines for Tottenham to be able to try and link the defence and the attack. So instead, Tottenham are using Ndombele and Højbjerg to be able to get the ball to those wide areas, and then from there try and cross it in for now hopefully the extra man and the extra potential to win a header in the box. In those wide spaces, there was still the onus on the wide midfielders or the forwards of Tottenham to be able to combine with their fullbacks to try and create the space for either themselves or the centre midfield, so thinking Højbjerg or Ndombele, to be able to find a little bit of space to whip in the cross. Moving on to Manchester United's press, I'd say that they pressed in a 4-1-3-2 shape, considerably more organised than versus Liverpool the week before, where their right hand side of the press in that game was particularly disorganised and the defence typically committed even when they shouldn't, eventually causing a domino snowball effect. Whereas in this game, of course, a change in shape and personnel, and the team was a lot more conservative in pressing, often dropping deeper and allowing the Manchester United centre midfielders as well as wing backs to try and win the ball back in those wide spaces. In the 4-1-3-2, Fred and Wan-Bissaka are the ones stationed either side of Bruno Fernandes, and then a little bit deeper you have McTominay. With this shape, they can press both the centre midfielders as well as also the fullbacks of Tottenham. So when Tottenham played it out the back, they were able to try and collapse towards that side. Okay, so we've got one of the few examples of Manchester United pressing in the game. We have Wan-Bissaka, as mentioned, really high up on that right hand side, and then you've got Fred high up on the left hand side. You've got Tottenham building up in their 2-4-1-3, so you've got their two centre midfielders midfielders relatively deep in Højbjerg and Skip, and he's got Lo Celso dropping to try and provide an option in behind the Manchester United press. And this being the next phase of the play, we can see Cavani helping to collapse in on Tottenham's right-hand side and hopefully make it more difficult for Tottenham to be able to play out the back. Whilst Manchester United's press did well this game, there's definitely potential for them to get hurt if they play against a better passing team. When you look at the options that Tottenham still had to be able to pass versus this press. Another means of Tottenham trying to attack during this game was through counters. Of course, they've got an absolutely devastating front line when it comes to counters. However, versus those counters, Manchester United's wide centre-backs were positioned very aggressively and were able to prevent most counters from even getting off the ground. I want to avoid an outcome-based decision here, and I would say that actually some of those chances that Tottenham did create were very good and probably should have been scored. Manchester United's tactics this game were very much damage control. We see that in the change of formation, as well as also in the way that they built up from deep, moving to a 2-4 deep with the 3 centre-backs shuffling across to the right-hand side. So instead of at a more traditional right centre-back position, we have Lindelof here at a right-back position with Wan Bissaka really high up on that right-hand side, almost playing a right-wing position. This was versus Tottenham's 4-2-3-1 press, where Harry Kane was tasked with pressing either centre-back that received the ball from the goalkeeper and pressing towards the touchline, whilst the wide forwards in Moura and Son would try and then press whoever was in those full-back positions, obviously here being Shaw and Lindelof. There was potential for Lo Celso to get overloaded in the centre of the park versus McFred, but he would have Højbjerg or Skip come and support him. In this phase of play, Manchester United are able to play through the press, but later on, once Manchester United score, they try and protect what they have by playing predominantly long goal kicks for the rest of the game. Later in the game, once Manchester United brought on Matic, then they moved to, I would call it a 3-1-4 at the back. So we have the 3 centre-backs and then you have Matic in front of them. And then in that line of 4, you've got your wing-backs as well as also McFred. So in possession, Manchester United were typically set up in a 3-2-3-2 shape. Luke Shaw and Saka were expected to carry the threat in the wide spaces, constantly trying to dribble or make overlapping runs to try and get into spaces to try and then whip in across for Cavani and Ronaldo to just bury. To help the wing-backs in the wide spaces, Manchester United's Portuguese contingent were constantly pulling out wide to try and support their wing-backs. So in this case, we have Ronaldo far side, who obviously has an affinity for that left-hand side, pulling out into that space so that if the switch is on, Luke Shaw will have someone to be able to pass to. And also on the right-hand side, you were constantly having Fernandes trying to combine with Wan Bissaka. Due to the formational mismatch with a back 3 versus a back 4, there's a lot of importance on the centre midfielders for Tottenham tracking the runs of whoever the extra spare man is for Manchester United. So to try and prevent Wan Bissaka from being able to find that much space on the wide spaces, the full-backs for Tottenham were really aggressive in trying to just stop them as early as possible. We can see that with just how wide Ben Davies' position was, but then that obviously creates a huge space between himself and his centre-back partner Dyer. Manchester United try and take advantage of that space with the run of Fernandes, but the centre midfielders of Tottenham, in this case Skip, covers over so that Dyer doesn't have to come all the way across and potentially cause an imbalance in the Tottenham defensive structure. This kind of shuffling across does then leave a lot of space far side for Manchester United to try and expose, which they tried to do with a lot of switches, often from right to left to Luke Shaw, who would be in tons of space. So this being the next phase of play, Varane is just switching the ball out to Luke Shaw. I would like to highlight here Ronaldo's movement, because just earlier he was actually being tracked by Emerson Royal, but as the ball is switched, Royal has to switch his priorities towards the wing back of Manchester United, and he's then covered by his centre midfielder. Whilst the focus of this section is predominantly on Manchester United's build-up, I do think it's also important to mention just how aggressive the wing-backs were for Manchester United. It meant that Fernandes and McFred were really important in getting back, making recovery runs. There were 1 or 2 recovery tackles by Fernandes this game, which were really, really important. And then finally, with regards to Manchester United's counters, they were really dependent on Bruno Fernandes, Cavani and Ronaldo mostly, but then sometimes they were supported by McFred as well as also the wing-backs. Later, Ole Gunnar Solskjaer made a couple of substitutions to bring on the likes of Lingard and Rashford, and they gave a little bit more fresh legs to the counter-attacks. The next video will tactically analyse the game between PSG Femenino and Real Madrid in the Women's Champions League. Real Madrid have the same number of points as PSG in the UEFA Women's Champions League, but are sitting in 13th of 16 in the Primera Iberdrola. Going forward, I'm going to try and mention which match I'm going to tactically analyse so that it's easier to follow, but disclaimer, I may change my mind at the drop of a hat just due to other results seeming more interesting. And with that, we're out.